Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast. Today's Wednesday, February the 12th. Zach Ewing here with our advocate basketball beat writers, Reed Darcey on the women's side and Toyloy TJ Brown on the men's side. Two squads going in complete opposite directions that we will talk about today.
Yes, absolutely. And we're great to have you back, Zach. You know, you survived the Super Bowl and a Saints coaching search, huh? How's it feel?
Yeah, survive is a good way to put it. We're not quite there with the Saints coaching search yet, but we're coming close. We got Kellen Moore being introduced tomorrow in a Saints Insider podcast coming on that YouTube channel. While you're at it, subscribe to both of our YouTube channels, LSU Tigers at NOLA.com and the Saints at NOLA.com. Our two YouTube channels growing fast, bring a couple podcasts every week to you all the way through the year. And today it's time to talk some basketball, and it's even the records are opposite. You got 10-1 and 1-9. I think everyone probably wants to talk about the women more. They've been playing exciting games. There is quite a bit to talk about on the men's side, TJ. Like Matt McMahon is having a bad year. Not only is he having a worse year than anyone thought, he's having a much worse year than anyone thought possible, like on New Year's Day. I mean, it's just been a bad month.
Yeah, it's just gotten worse and worse, and conference play is where the games really matter the most, and that's where they've come up the shortest. So, yeah, a lot to break down with Matt McMahon and the team.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that, but we are going to lead off with the ladies, and they played another instant classic at the PMAC. They've had a couple of those now in SEC play, beating Tennessee 82-77. Do I have the final score right? Yeah,
that's right.
I mean, this was a game that was within 5 points the entire second half. If you missed it because it was like pregame Super Bowl, you really missed out. It had, I think I went back and looked in the second half, 6 lead changes, 2 ties. LSU led most of the second half, but it was never comfortable. Tennessee even closed it back within 2 with 20 seconds left. Kaylin Gilbert had to hit a couple of big free throws. I mean, this was just another gut check for Kim Mulkey's team, and they responded.
Yeah, I was thinking surely this has to be the time when they lose one of these close games. You know, it just feels like they keep finding themselves in these close games, and they keep winning them. You know, I think when you look at a team like that and you look at them early on in the season and they've played a bunch of tight games, you say, okay, this will probably regress to the mean at some point, right? If you win the first 4 of them, you're probably going to drop another 1 or 2 along the way. And they did lose to South Carolina, but aside from that game, which South Carolina always kept them at arm's length, it felt like throughout, they just keep winning these close games, you know. And now they have 5 quad 1 wins. They're one of 6 teams in the country with at least 5 quad 1 wins. And they have, I believe, 7 wins in games that were decided by 10 points or fewer. They're one of 3 ranked teams that has at least 7 of those wins. So they are battle tested, and now they have a lot of quality wins. They've got 2 wins over Tennessee now. They've got a win over Vanderbilt. They've got a win over Oklahoma. And if you recall, they beat NC State the week of Thanksgiving, and that win just keeps on looking better and better because NC State has won a lot of games since then, and now they're back in the top 10 of the AP poll. So I think LSU teams under Kim Mulkey, we always have to wait until January or February to find out exactly how good they are because they never schedule a particularly tough non-conference slate of games. And I think now we can get to the point where we can say that, all right, they are firmly in the race for the national title. A few teams have dropped out, but I think they're firmly still in, and a lot of it is because they've been in those close games and they've come away with wins against some really quality opponents.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody can say they're not a national title contender with the list of accomplishments that you just had and that they've figured it out. What they're missing a little bit, and this is kind of unlike Kim Mulkey teams, but they're missing the style points. Like, they don't have the performance where you go, wow, there's only 2 teams in the country that could do that. They do have the body of work. And but I do wonder, how much do you worry looking forward? And we'll talk about this in a minute. We're actually almost at the end of the season. We're coming down to it very quickly here, especially on the women's side. But how much do you worry about their prospects going forward in the tournament, given the fact that they do seem to find themselves in these dogfights every other night?
Yeah, I think it's a sign of a good team to be able to win those kinds of games. And I think the more that the season has gone on, I think I've come I've come to the point that this is just a really good team, because this is what really good teams do. You know, if I could use an NFL example real quick, it's not the best after what happened in the Super Bowl, but the Kansas City Chiefs,
in
of
my mind
course,
too, man.
Yeah, the Kansas City Chiefs, of course, that they had so many close games this season, and they just kept winning them. You know, right? You were like, surely they're going to lose this one, right? This is going to be the time, but you can always count on them to pull out a win in a one-score game, and that's similar to what I keep seeing with LSU. I just think they have a combination of personnel, talent, shot creation to really thrive in those kinds of situations. Maybe they're not blowing teams out, but they have 3, 4 maybe shot creators who can really do their thing when the games get close and the defense gets tight. I think Michaela Williams, you've seen her step up big in those moments. You've seen Kaylin Gilbert now break out of a shooting slump, and she's come up huge in crucial moments of big games. Those two combined with Flau'jae Johnson and Anissa Moore, I mean, that's a really good, strong nucleus of talent who can help you win against tough defenses in close games. So I think the more they find themselves in these situations, we'll see if they drop another 1 or 2 down the stretch. But they're built to win in those kinds of environments, which bodes well for their chances in March.
Yeah, and a quick small point when you was listing off the names, Gilbert, Williams. I think against Tennessee, Flau'jae only had 12 points. And that's impressive that you don't need your best player, your 20-point-per-game scorer, to have an electric night in order to win these close games. Other contributors can get rebounds, can make a timely mid-range or three-pointer. Again, be boosting your argument. Sign of good teams is that they can win in different ways and rely on different people to come through for them.
Yeah, Kaylin Gilbert's been huge. She if you look at the first Tennessee game that LSU played and the second Tennessee game that LSU played, she had 20 points in each game, but in the 7 games in between those 2 games, she found herself in quite a pretty nasty shooting slump. She missed 45 of the 53 shots she took over that stretch.
Lady Vol's got to be like, why us, man?
Yeah. And then she came back and put it on the Lady Vols again. So we'll look to see if she can be consistent, you know, if she can maintain that throughout these next few games, because I think if she can, then that obviously bodes even better for LSU's chances.
And that's huge just from like a floor spacing perspective, I think, with how good they are inside, and they do have some scores around the perimeter. If you can add that element of the sharpshooter when she's not there, and I mean, they were still outside of South Carolina, they were still winning games. So to y'all's point, like they have found a way. So let's look at these last 5 games, and that's all. Again, that's all they've got left is 5 regular season games. Mm-hmm. Now they do have the advantage of, after playing Tennessee, they get the little bye week, and they don't play again until Sunday. But it's the most difficult game left on their schedule, and it is a difficult finish. It's at Texas, and in the SEC standings, surprise, surprise, Texas beat South Carolina. So now you have 3 10-1 teams. South Carolina and Texas split with each other. South Carolina beat LSU, and now LSU will play Texas. So 3 10-1 teams tied atop the league. This is as big as it gets. LSU didn't play South Carolina again. So this very well could be, at least for a share of the conference championship.
Yeah, at least LSU is still in play for at least a share of the regular season SEC title. A lot of it will be determined by what happens on Sunday when LSU goes on the road to play Texas at Austin. That's going to be a really tough game for LSU to win. It's another top 5 matchup. I think if you look, though, at the rest of the schedule, it's Texas, it's Alabama, it's Kentucky, and it's Ole Miss. It's those 4 games that LSU has left. But those are really tough games. You know, all of those games are going to be quad 1 games, which means that LSU is going to finish its regular season with 10, I believe, quad 1 games. That's quite a lot. I think if you look last year, they had about 13, but that includes the SEC tournament, which they had picked up about three of those quad 1 games in the tournament. So 10 is quite a lot, and we'll see how they fare down these stretch of games. I think Kentucky's going to be tough because it's on the road. They're a really well-coached team. Alabama and Ole Miss, they're both really good defensive teams. They've got a lot of returning production. I think it's going to be really tough for LSU to win any of those games. But as we've seen throughout the season, they can beat quality teams. So we'll see how they fare over those 4 games. They're still in play for a share of the SEC title, and I think they're still in play for a 1 seed, maybe a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and I don't know who South Carolina has left, Reed, but there's always a possibility somebody else picks them off, and you could be in play for an outright SEC championship if you win on Sunday.
I guess so, but South Carolina never loses. So, I mean, I was pretty shocked that they lost even on the road at Texas. So we'll see about that. I always sort of pencil them in as as the SEC regular season champs until I see otherwise. So we'll see how things go.
This game against Texas, and LSU, by the way, only has 2 home games left. So if you want to see them in act, not counting now, they'll get the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament at home, but the 2 regular season home games left. So if you want to go out to the PMAC, you better get your tickets. This game at Texas, what makes the Longhorns a different matchup than, say, LSU against South Carolina? Where are they going to challenge LSU?
Maddie Booker, she's one of the best players in the country. She's a sophomore. She was the first freshman to ever win Big 12 Player of the Year last year. If you look at the first matchup Texas played against South Carolina, she really struggled with her shot. She didn't shoot it very efficiently at all. South Carolina did a good job defending her. And since then, she's played really well. She's been super efficient from the field and from 3-point range. She's passing it well. She's distributing it well. Everything in their offense revolves around her and her ability to create shots, not only for herself but for others. So South Carolina, they're more so like evenly balanced, if I could say that. They've got 8 or 9 players who can all beat you in different ways. Texas, really everything they do is revolves around Maddie Booker and what she can do offensively. So I'll be curious to see how LSU defends her. Does LSU put Flau'jae Johnson on her like we've seen it do in previous games when they put Flau'jae on the other team's best perimeter defender? Or do they want to mix it up a little bit? Do they want to maybe put another player on Maddie Booker for most of the game so Flau'jae has more energy on offense? We'll see, but I think if LSU can hold her under 20 points or so and hold her to less than efficient shooting day, then I think it's got a real good chance to win because everything sort of revolves around her with them.
I wonder how Texas, I guess, will game plan on the perimeter when it comes to defense, because obviously we just brought up how Flau'jae, a really good player, really athletic, but also Michaela Williams has something else to contribute. Gilbert as well. So I wonder if Texas will have a unique sort of game plan for trying to limit those scores on the outside.
Yeah.
One of the games of the year in women's basketball. It's number 5 LSU at number 3 Texas, 2 p.m. Sunday. It's on ABC. And no excuse if there's no big football game to miss it. It's on network TV. I mean, it's like, and I know South Carolina is probably the game of LSU season, but this is like 1B.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be there. It's one of 2 trips we planned this season: South Carolina and Texas. So I'll be there in Austin. It should be fun.
Yeah, great. Okay, we talked up the 25-1 team. Now we got to go to the other side of the coin. Toyloy,
it's my seeding.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talked about this from the jump with the LSU men that this SEC was going to be a total gauntlet. Such a good league. No off nights. You could argue South Carolina, but outside of that, and even they're like a top 100 team. They're not a bad team. Then LSU had the injury, and it was always going to be tough. But I'm not sure anybody expected it to be this tough. And the perfect encapsulation of that was Saturday when LSU had an 11-point lead on Ole Miss with just over 3 minutes to go, and not only lost, but lost in regulation. Didn't even get that thing to overtime. Just a total collapse. I think 3 or 4 turnovers in the last 3 minutes. Missed some free throws. Ole Miss stepped up. Obviously, you got to give them credit too. But that's a game that if you're LSU and you're just so desperate for another SEC win, gotta have it.
Yeah, I feel like before I talk about the men's team, I have to take a little inhale and exhale, because just sort of you can go a lot of different directions. A lot of them are bad because it's just been a disappointing sort of. Yeah, the entire SEC play, only 1 win up to this point is just really disappointing, especially after going 11-2 non-conference. And that was sort of the difference maker between last year's team, where non-conference you had some fumbles and you did pretty well in the conference play, and now it's reversed this season. To sort of talk about Ole Miss game, I was there obviously at home. Very deflating, very disastrous in terms of the concept of that one game. You finally felt like, okay, LSU finally is going to get one against a ranked team, no less. And they just blew it 11 points. They had an 11-point lead with 3 minutes and 15 seconds left, and they get led up a 13-0 run. They didn't make their free throws. They didn't make a shot. They had some costly turnovers, even a non-turnover. I think Cam Carter, their best player, who's hard to make a lot of complaints about him, but he had one grave error where they had about a 5-point lead with about a minute or so left, and they had to break a full-court trap. And instead of, after they broke it with Cam Carter, who had like a lot of space to dribble past the half-court line, he could have just stuck around, dribbled it for another 20 seconds, bleed the clock, until about 40 seconds remained in the game or around there, and he decided to go for a layup instead, and he didn't get fouled. He missed the layup. Ole Miss gets the ball back, obviously, and they make it a 3-point game instead of LSU potentially making it a 7-point game if they scored. So things of that nature, mental errors were really bad. And when I got to the post-game press conference, that was the lowest I've seen Cam Carter, who was a very energetic, very positive dude, even though they lost, let's say, 3-4 games straight. Not that he was excited, it's just that he didn't sound totally defeated. He always had his mindset towards the next game, fix our mistakes, we got to do this better. And this game, not that he wasn't looking forward to trying to improve those mistakes, it's just that you saw the life was drained out of him. This was the game to win, and they blew it.
Yeah, I think you hit on something there. It's not just that you lost Ole Miss, because if they had lost some, run-of-the-mill 8 to 10 points, like, okay, that's a good team, you're still shorthanded, you're fighting it, but keep fighting sort of thing. But the possibility of what that win could have meant for the rest of the season. I forget NCAA tournament talk or anything like that. Like that's unrealistic at this point. But just to have it turned around and say, hey, we're still fighting, we're still going to win some of these games. And maybe they still get there, TJ, but like the fact that was in your grasp and then it's gone, that makes it that much more painful.
Yeah, it was excruciating for even McMahon. He's not one to use colorful language, not really one to be dramatic, but he said 2 words: this was a heartbreaker, and this was crushing. And he said that he's still going to focus on the positives and try to make sure that they repeat those positives and fix those issues. Another issue I should have brought up, LSU shot 48% from the free throw line, and they were, I think, 2 weeks ago, the #1 team in the conference play when it came to free throw shooting.
Man.
So it's just like, man.
There's a couple of front ends of 1-and-1s, too, so it's even worse than it looked. It's just so bad.
The freshman big man sort of came up short. Robert Miller went 0 for 4 from the free throw line. And Corey Chesu had a solid game, 12 rebounds, some nice defensive plays, but he went 1 for 6 from the free throw line. And that's 9 missed free throws just from those 2 alone. So, yeah, that was a real big, reason for that loss. And, yeah, when it comes to sort of, again, the energy that LSU had going into that game, it was impressive. Ole Miss was a team they lost to on the road early in January, and they had the game plan. They were set in terms of the defensive coverages as far as making sure not to let Sean Padula, who made some threes, not let him make too much. Malik Dia, who had 19 points against in the first matchup, he had only, I think, 4 or 6 points in the second matchup. So they did what they needed to do. They just crumbled when it mattered the most.
Correct me if I'm wrong, TJ. I believe over the last 3-minute stretch, you mentioned LSU had 1 field goal attempt. Is that right? When you combine the turnovers and the turnovers,
free throws,
the missed free throws, they had 1 field goal,
and that was the Cam Carter.
There's definitely that Cam Carter left. They may have had 1 more in that stretch, but they had a couple turnovers and the free throws. They just smoked them.
Yeah,
it's just rough. And again, is it the most meaningful result in the world as far as NCAA tournament? No. But you're just, when you're in a season like that, you're just looking for something. And I think, and we can talk about Matt McMahon's future in a minute, but the important thing here is going to be how badly does this continue to snowball? Because that was your chance to stop that snowball rolling down the hill. And the fact that it got past you and you're still chasing it is very demoralizing. And if you look at the schedule here, it doesn't match up well with what's at home and what's on the road. Because this week LSU has two of the teams in the bottom half of the conference in Arkansas and Oklahoma, but they're both road games. And tonight is Arkansas, who is playing a little bit better. Arkansas is a 9.5-point favorite in that game. I would expect Oklahoma to be around the same on Saturday, maybe 7 or 8 point favorite. Next week, now this is the one you got to get if you're going to get another one, and that's South Carolina at home. But then after that, it's Florida and Tennessee at home. You get 3 straight home games, but 2 of them are against top 5 teams. Number 3 and number 5. And then in March, at Mississippi State, a top 25 team. At Kentucky, a top 25 team. And then home against Texas A&M, another top 10 team. So if you kind of look at that in totality, there is – now LSU will probably be favored against South Carolina. But outside of that, I'm not sure they're going to be anywhere near expected to win any of the rest of those games. I mean, it would be a significant upset if they won anything other than South Carolina.
Yeah, something will have to change drastically for them to be favored in any of those games besides South Carolina. And funny enough, even with South Carolina on Ken Palm, not that Ken Palm's the end-all be-all, but South Carolina at this point is ranked a little bit higher than LSU on Ken Palm, even though they're winless in the conference. I guess in order for LSU to, again, try to salvage and get some sort of positive energy and some success, really, they have to rely on their defense. I think we have enough evidence to say that this is not a gifted offensive unit here. They're not the most, and even when they did have one awesome shooting night against Georgia, they made 10 threes in the first half, which was, I think, 9 or 10 threes in the first half. They didn't have any two-pointers. They made their first two-point basket against Georgia, I think, with 2 minutes left in the first half, and they just were relying on three-pointers and ended up getting cold and shooting a good 38%, but after making 9 and having like a close to 50% three-point field goal percentage, that's not really good when you're not having the two-pointers and the free throws to go along with it. So, yeah, that was like their one blessed shooting night by the shooting gods. That's not going to happen most likely going forward, and their defense has to create their offense. Cam Carter is someone that is a good offensive player, their best offensive player, but he's someone that does well in transition and does well coming off of pin downs and screens for three-pointers or one dribble pull-ups. Jordan Sears is another one that does well in transition after you get a stop. And if you're not getting enough stops, which was an issue, but not too much against Ole Miss, they did do well defensively. But against Texas, which was a winnable game, and against Georgia, another winnable game, albeit on the road, they had their two worst defensive performances. So, yeah, the Ole Miss game was heartbreaking, but the two games before that, with Georgia, with Texas, those were also killer because they didn't stick to their identity of being a defensive-first group and having that defense lead to fast break layups, open shots, confidence being built up. So, yeah, if they don't return to that, and they did have a return to that against Ole Miss, but you worry since they didn't get the result, even though they followed the right formula, will they have the right energy when they play against Arkansas, who is the only team they beat in SEC play, but Arkansas is better now. Their 7'2" big man, Zvonimir Ivisic, he's shooting over 49% from three in his last 3 games at 7'2". So that's another threat that they didn't have to worry about back when they played. So, yeah, LSU's in they have a lot of things to battle, and we'll see starting tonight and against Oklahoma, another team that is, even though they're lower tier in the conference, they have a talented freshman that is a first-round pick. So it doesn't really get easier.
And they've lost all the quote-unquote winnable games. You know, I remember before the season started, Zach, we were saying, like, okay, win the quote-unquote easy games. I guess there are no easy games.
Yeah, anyway.
Easier games, win those and prevent your season from snowballing. Well, it's certainly snowballed, and it's not looking like things are going to get any prettier down the stretch. So we'll see.
No, I almost do feel like they're better off on the road this week. Like, do you want to be in a PMAC where there's probably very little energy? And if there is, it may be negative energy and that sort of thing. And if things start to go bad, you're on the road for 2 games this week. Maybe you can, even if you don't win one of them, play hard, show that you haven't quit on the season. Then I think you come back home for South Carolina and have a little bit of energy and can kind of put everything into, for whatever it's worth, winning one more game. And what it may be worth, and that's where we can transition into talk about Matt McMahon's future. If you had asked me even a week ago, I would have said, TJ, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I would have said he's safe. And I would have said any conversation about his future, his immediate future at LSU is premature. Now I'm just starting to let that doubt creep in a little bit, and it's the way they lost to Ole Miss, but it's also kind of, you look again at the totality of the situation and say, well, yes, you lost Jalen Cook. That's a big injury, and you had a decent non-conference. That probably shows more of what a kind of a team you are versus this ridiculously tough conference. But you got to do better than 1-17. You got to do better than 2-16. I mean, it'd be one thing if he had an NCAA tournament appearance to hang his hat on in the first 2 years. Didn't have that. They were showing some baby steps of improvement. I don't know, man. You got that South Carolina game just looms large in my head for Matt McMahon. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, no, I see it similarly. We haven't yet, amongst the reporters, we haven't yet asked him about sort of security and job. It would have been a little early, but yeah, I've been asked about it just in everyday life, within the building and outside the building. So it's definitely, I'm sure, a thought that has crossed the minds of people that actually have some power. Matt McMahon, this is year 3. Upward trajectory was hoped for after going 9-9 in the conference play last year, missing the tournament last year. because of just not doing well in non-conference. Year one was year one. It's a wash, sort of just building the team from scratch. So year three was, okay, his fingerprints are more on this team. We had to see some level of results in terms of having a real chance on the bubble again and do better amongst our conference rivals. And it's been the opposite, where they look worse. Again, the injury to Jalen Reed was huge. That's their second best player, or what I would have believed would have been their second best player at a position of need at the center spot. At 240 pounds, good rebounder, good post scorer. And they lost Tyrell Ward, who stepped away due to mental health reasons. Those two things out of your control. But as far as the rest of the way with the players you do have, this team probably should have at least 2 more wins than what it does actually have in the conference play. And some of that's coaching. Some of that, of course, is obviously players just not performing. You can't really coach up 48% free throw shooting. It's hard to do that besides just get more shots up in the practice facility. But yeah, I think it's still early. I know it sucks to not really have a direct answer if his job in jeopardy, but it really depends on how they close. The SEC is still a monster. I think right now this week 9 teams are in the top 25, and I think 8 of them are in the top 30 of KenPom. So like the SEC is still a real beast, and they're playing these games tough. Against Ole Miss, that was a really tough game against a real potential round of 32 Sweet 16 type team. So when it comes to his job, yes, it's up in the air. It's not as confident that he's going to be back as it was earlier when they were 11-2 in non-conference play. I think it was a 7-year contract that he signed. So I think they did plan for him to be here for the long haul and really not rush it. But a year 3 sort of downfall, especially if they only have 2 wins in SEC play by the end of the season, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be hard to sort of convince the fan base to put faith that he's going to construct a roster and coach a team that's going to improve.
Yeah, it's important we point out that 7-year contract because when LSU hired Matt McMahon, it gave him that 7-year contract because of all the uncertainty surrounding the NCAA sanctions that they thought may or may not be coming when they hired him. So they wanted to give him a long runway to sort of build his program. So because they gave him that long contract, the buyout is not going to come cheap. If they do want to decide to make a move, it's going to come in around probably $8 or $9 million.
I'm looking at it right now. Actually, it's half of what he's left, and so if he's bought out this year, that's $7.5 million, and it really does not go down that much. Next year is $6.1 million. Then it goes down a little, $4.6 million and $3.1 million. In the last year of the deal. So at some point, if it continues like this, you're going to have to bite that bullet. But I do think. And Reed, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think there's a couple of kind of counterpoints to, and one of them is the finances of it, right? Like this is a time for this athletic department as a whole in which money is important. We know this for NIL, for recruiting efforts and getting transfers in every sport, but especially in football, which is going to be your moneymaker. Like, do you want to throw $7.5 million at getting a new basketball coach? The other counterpoint I'll make is they've got a top 20 recruiting class coming in. It's not great. It's not the top 2 in the nation or anything like that, but they've got some good players coming in. And if you make a change, you're probably losing those guys. And the new coach is starting over. And the third point I would make is just in college basketball, things can turn around very quickly. And you talk about the runway, like you'd like to see the plane start to take off and then get higher and higher and higher. And instead of doing that, you thought he was going to take off and then he slammed back down to the ground. That's not what you want to see. But Missouri was 0-18 in this league last year, and they're an NCAA tournament team that I think is like 6th in the conference. I'm not saying that you want to go 0-18, but I'm saying if you do, if LSU goes 1-17, 2-16, it's not the end of the world in college basketball. You can rebound from that, and so if Scott Woodward and the LSU powers that be look at Matt McMahon and think they've got the right guy in the building, I don't think you can get too caught up in the frustrations of one bad season, even as bad as this one is.
Yeah, I remember I did a story on Matt McMahon, sort of going into his background, and spoke to some current coaches on the staff. Didn't speak to any higher-ups, but based off what I did speak to, or who I did speak to in just casual conversations, McMahon's well-liked. McMahon is not someone that doesn't build confidence that he's going to get the job done. He's very serious. He's very committed. That's one thing you can't say. He's not just sleeping well at night, that this team is what is done in the conference play. Not that is the end-all, be-all, and is why you keep someone on the job, but it doesn't hurt. And yeah, as he said, with the recruiting class, they have 3 4 stars. One that's a stretch center, stretch power forward that I'm really excited for. I think his name's Matt Galul. I might mispronounce the last name, but he's someone that they legitimately don't have a shooting power forward or center. Their best shooters are 5'11" and 6'3". So that's someone that you don't want to lose if you're LSU, if you somehow decide to get rid of the coach.
Yeah, and LSU soon is going to have to start sharing around $20 million of their revenue with the athletes, right? And it's going to come because they have to do that soon. It's going to have to start coming with a little bit of belt tightening, right? Even for programs and athletic departments like LSU across the country, you're going to see those kinds of athletic departments try to cut back on costs as much as possible, right? So making a coaching change like this one would come with a pretty heavy price tag when you factor in the buyout for McMahon, the buyout for the assistant coaches, the new coach's salary, the new coach's assistant's salary, and I'm sure that new coach is going to come on and have certain kind of demands about, NIL and revenue sharing and all those kinds of things. So it won't come cheap at a time when LSU really needs to focus on and be careful with the money it doles out, because it has to start sharing revenue with its football players especially, and make sure that Brian Kelly has enough to succeed at the level that LSU needs him to succeed because of how much they have invested in him. So it's all connected, and all these sort of situations, they all have effects on each other. So it should be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, as much as it seems like it's monopoly money at points, it's not. There is a limit to it. There's only so much that has to be spread around to all these different places. And if I'm Scott Woodward and a booster comes to me and says, I'm very frustrated with Matt McMahon, here's $8 million to buy him and his assistants out, please do it, I'd put my arm around his shoulders and say, hey, could we put that $8 million to better use?
Yeah.
Like there are probably places we can improve this athletic department. And again, like I mentioned Missouri, 0-18. That's the same coaching staff. They didn't change a thing.
Nope, Dennis Gates still there.
Yeah, same coach, same assistant coach. A lot of the same. I mean, everybody's roster turns over somewhat, but it's like it can change. Okay, it's like it's not like Matt McMahon suddenly forgot how to coach. Like, they're obviously in a rut. Wednesday's the type of frustrating, Saturday's the type of frustrating performance that can make people make emotional decisions like, God dang it, this isn't working and we got to make a change. But I would just pump the brakes, me personally.
Yeah, no, I hear you. The fans hear that, but the fans only care about the results, or most fans, I should say they only care about the results, and the results don't look good. There's a reason behind the results as far as losses, and even Victorious Miller, he missed 3 games due to ankle injury in the middle of SEC play, and he's trying to get back in motion as far as his health. So, yeah, those are excuses, of course, but those are, I guess, sound excuses for why the results look the way they do. And again, Matt McMahon, he's someone that's not sleeping too easily based off just my conversations with him. He's not sleeping too easily at night with this team and looking the way they do. And, he's going to try to win the game, like to win the games that are in front of him, but he's going to also look towards the future as far as how we not have this repeat again.
Yeah. All right, so 8 games left on the LSU men's basketball side in the regular season, starting tonight at Arkansas. Only 5 left on the women's side.
Yep.
And a big one starting Sunday against Texas. So let's wrap this up. Men's or women's side, free for all. One bold prediction for the rest of the basketball regular season.
God.
I've got one, so I'll give you guys time to think about it. So hopefully I don't steal anybody's. Mine is that the LSU men win at least 2 more games, not just South Carolina, but they pick somebody else off. I still think they're playing good enough to do that. Don't think they'll quit completely. I didn't plan on coming on this show planning on defending the LSU men, so it was just kind of happened. But I actually do believe that the more I think about it. I think they get at least 2 more. I don't know if that's bold enough, but that's mine.
So they would be 3-15?
At least 3 SEC wins.
Okay. I remember for the women, I remember at the start, I said they would go 12-4 in conference. That's not looking so hot right now, that prediction. So I think maybe boldly, I don't know how bold this is, but maybe I'll say they get a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament or a 1 seed in the regional. I think a lot has to depend on that. We're going to beat Texas, maybe how you do in the SEC tournament, but I think it's on the table now for sure.
All right.
Yeah, I guess for my bold one, probably would have stole yours if you didn't say that. But let's say LSU wins against the second win they get after South Carolina, hopefully, for their sakes, is they win against a top 15 team. I think at some point, either Tennessee is great, but Tennessee does have some droughts on offense. Kentucky's great. Kentucky can sometimes get a little loose and maybe the threes don't fall. So yeah, I think one of those two teams, or Mississippi State, if they rise in the AP rankings and they're top 15 1 week, I think they can steal at least one of those type of games.
All right, I like it. So that's our basketball pod. We're going to be back later this week with the second half of our LSU baseball season preview with Koki Riley, and Scott Rabelais is going to join us too, so don't miss that. That'll probably come out Friday morning with the baseball season starting Friday night. Also got a 1 versus 2 gymnastics meet at the PMAC on Friday night, LSU, Oklahoma, so that'll be a lot of fun. And until then, we're going to sign off for our producer, Alex Lee. He's Toyloy Brown and Reed Darcey. I'm Zach Ewing, and thank you for watching the LSU Sports Insider.